Hi all, this is for Music Theory 2, Chapter 10, dealing with cadences, and I wanted to give you some examples on how to analyze a cadence. Right at the beginning of your self-test 10.1, there are a number of examples that have, cadences, basically some brief two-measure excerpts with cadences at the end of them. Usually your cadences won't happen in this form. Usually you'll have 4 to 8 measure phrases with that cadence right at the end. And the examples you'll be doing in the workbook will look like that. But for right now, these are sort of in a vacuum, and we can kind of look at them and use them for practicing what cadences look like. So like I said before in my instructional video, cadences will be, harmonically speaking, will be the last two chords in our phrase, right? One chord to kind of set up, and then one chord to finalize the phrase. And of course, that last chord can be a 1 chord, it can be a 5 chord, sometimes it can be a 6 chord if it's a deceptive cadence, but whatever the case may be, those are the 2 chords you want to focus on. So I'm just going to do the first 3 here, and I want to let you practice on the rest of these. And then I'm going to go down and look at a couple of the examples, similar examples that you'll have in your homework for this week. So this first one is in B flat major. So when we're doing these, we want to hone in on these last 2 chords, because if we're saying that this is a cadence point right here, point of reprieve, musical goal, end of a phrase, however you want to say it, musical punctuation, the last 2 chords are going to be the chords we're really looking at. So this is a 5 chord, and this is a 1 chord. So it seems to be an authentic cadence, dominant, tonic, right? And so the question is it an imperfect authentic cadence or a perfect authentic cadence? Well, we have root position or root motion in the bass, root position 5, root position 1, so that checks out for perfect. But we don't have our tonic pitch in the soprano. This is actually scale degree 3. So we would have to label this an imperfect authentic cadence because it doesn't meet all of our criteria to be a perfect authentic cadence. Let me play the next one. So looking at our last 2 chords, I think this makes the first chord and this makes our last chord. So kind of combined together there. Oops, erased a little too much. I would say this is a minor 4 chord right here, moving basically from this beat into the downbeat. And this is a 5 chord. So ending on a 5 chord, incomplete, non-final, we call this a half cadence, or we call it HC as the abbreviation. And finally, like I said, you can go through and analyze all the chords, but mainly we're going to look at the last 2 chords, the setup and the final chord here. So I see a 5-7 chord in the key of G major and a 6 chord. So ending on that 6 chord, 5 to 6, we call this a deceptive cadence, or we'll call it DC for short. So there you go. That's kind of an idea how to do these last examples or these examples in the self-test. Feel free to do the rest of them on your own. I want to scroll down and kind of show you how to do some of the workbook examples that I'm having you do. And really, you're not doing much. You're not doing any of the, you're not taking any of the instructions that they actually give you in the workbook. Really what I want you to do is look at each of the examples and decide what kind of cadence you have. And they mark all of the chords for you, so you're not having to take this out at all. You're just having to really look at it and say, okay, what chord am I ending on? Is it a perfect authentic cadence? Is it an imperfect authentic cadence? Or is it a half cadence, or whatever it may be? So I'm going to play this example for you. Okay, so it should be obvious enough that we're ending on a 5 chord here, and he uses a cadential 6-4, which, remember, 1-6-4 is not a real 1 chord. When packaged with a 5 chord, It's really a dominant harmony. So we're ending on a dominant harmony or a 5 chord here. So we would call this a half cadence. It feels inconclusive. We need this next phrase to finish everything up. Okay, so I would just put your half cadence somewhere in the realm of that last chord. All right, and finally this last phrase, or this second phrase, and notice we have a phrase here and a phrase here. And remember, a phrase, in order for it to be a phrase, we have to have a cadence, much like in order for something to be a sentence, we have to have that punctuation at the end, a period, a comma, not a comma, a question mark, an exclamation point, whatever it may be. Same idea with phrases. Okay, so what's the cadence point happening here then, right? We have 5 to 1, so this is some sort of authentic cadence. We're ending on a tonic chord. We have a dominant chord setting it up. Both are in root position, so possibly a perfect authentic cadence. Notice you might look here and say, gosh, that doesn't end with a tonic pitch in the highest voice right here, or at the top of that chord. In fact, these are all non-chord tones here. So we're actually going to consider this our highest note, which is in fact scale degree 1 or do. And so we can say this is a perfect authentic cadence, right? He's kind of delaying the arrival of that with this chord, but we do finally get it, and we can't call this a perfect authentic cadence. So that's how you'll go about labeling the excerpts in your homework. Again, don't follow any of the instructions on diagramming the form or figuring out the phrasing or finding motives, anything like that. I really just want you to go through and identify the types of cadences that are being used. Okay? So let's zoom on over then to your workbook. And, oops, I'm going to the wrong application here. And you'll be doing some part writing in your workbook. These are what your part writing examples look like, and you'll be doing 1 through 4 for credit, no credit, and 9 through 12 for your graded assignment. But I'm going to take some of the ones in the middle here and show you how you're going to go about doing this. So let's look at number 5 first, and I'm going to completely ignore 3 parts as I usually do. We're going to go ahead and write this in 4 parts. So G major here. And notice I have a perfect authentic cadence. So this has to be 5, 2, 1. It has to be. All right? That's a perfect authentic cadence, root position. And so I already know that this is this, and I'm going to go ahead and write that up there. And you could go down if you wanted to. And I would start here because remember that cadence is that setup chord and that final chord, and you can figure out what to put here later. Let's just go ahead and voice our chord out here. And I am going to do this. So remember, we want to try to approach our 1 chord by step. And so what's important for that perfect authentic cadence is we have root motion here, and we have our tonic pitch as our highest note in our 1 chord. Yes? And so as I'm writing the rest of this out, I might write a D here, and I might write an F sharp there. And let's see. There's a couple ways we could go about doing this. Of course, you can voice this up here, leading tone up, and then voice our scaled, our D down to a B, and we'd have a tripled root. There might be another voicing option here. If we kind of trade up what we did over here, we could potentially if we put our F sharp right here and we voice up that way, and we hold on to our D here and our G here. Of course, our tonic pitch has to go up in our soprano. We could potentially keep our D here and arrive on our B there. And of course, we still have that perfect authentic cadence, that G and that top note. We've resolved our leading tone, and maybe I should be a little bit of a better teacher and be consistent here with our leading tone. I'll put it in red. Regardless, we want all of the criteria for our, that's my hand sketching in the rest of those. We want all of our criteria for our perfect authentic cadence: root position and tonic pitch in the soprano. Okay, and so then we can approach it with what kind of harmony? Well, we have a dominant harmony here, we have a tonic harmony here, dominant tonic. What comes before a tonic? Well, any sort of predominant. And so here, I'm just going to voice a 2/6 chord. Why not? And I think our 2/6 chord will easily sit like that. So our final sounding, we're in G major here. 2, 5, 1. And oops, I have an error here. Anybody caught it? Good for you. I should be doing that. I had parallel octaves there. But what I wanted you to hold on to most was the chord I voiced here, and this is a predominant. 2 or 4 will work in that case. Let me do one more for you. This is 4 parts for a plagal cadence. I'm sorry. Let's skip over. I'm going to skip over and do number 7. I thought I was going to do number 6, but let's do number 7. Let's do that leading tone IAC. So leading tone IAC, B flat major. Leading tone IAC is going to have some sort of 7 diminished 6 chord, followed by a 1 chord. And what precedes a dominant chord? Well, any sort of predominant chord. So it's going to be some sort of 2, or we could also do 4 as well, but we'll kind of figure out what we want to do there in a little bit. So another technique you could use is voice backwards from your 1 chord. So if you feel like you're having trouble getting from 7 to 6, then actually start at your 1 chord and you can work backwards. A 7 diminished 6 would be here, and our 7 diminished 6 in B is A, C, E flat. There's our 7 diminished chord. We're going to want to double this note because this note is our leading tone. We don't want to double the A. We don't want to double the A. I'm going to put this right here. There's our A. That's our leading tone. And sorry, I should be consistent here. We'll make this red A, leading tone. We don't want to double that. Let's go back to black. We'll go ahead and voice our C up here and voice an E down there. And we have a double third, and that E flat can be really anywhere you want it to be. And so the easiest way to get from here would probably be voicing a 2 chord. Here's our 2 chord, and we can keep those upper 2 notes. 2 and 7 are a third apart, so we have 2 common tones there. Works quite nicely. B flat major, 2, 7 diminished 6, root position 1. And again, just to emphasize, this is an IAC. This is a dominant chord followed by a tonic chord. Usually our 7 chords are in first inversion, and again, we're not doubling that leading tone, but rather we're going to double the chordal third. In this case, it was C. This time we worked backwards, so we started here and we voiced this way. Sometimes that's the easiest way to do things here instead of starting at the beginning, starting with what you know the end is and then working your way backwards. So there's some examples of part writing. If you have any further questions, please do let me know. I'm happy to meet with you during office hours on Monday, or if you have questions, you can always bring them up in class.